Okay then. Is this working? Hello and welcome to question and answer number 193. I am your host, pannobhasa. And my beverage is right over here. There it is. And I have to admit, 193 evidently is a prime number. So once again, we are in the prime of our lives while doing this Q&A. And I'm doing it late. This is like late on a Sunday. Usually, in the past, I've tended to do these Q&A videos on a Saturday, sometimes early in a Sunday, but this weekend has been action-packed. Yesterday was my woman's birthday, so yesterday was pretty much dedicated to being with her and all. And then today there's like errands to run, all kinds of stuff to do. So those of you who watch these videos like at some time after Sunday probably don't even notice. You don't give a shit. But there are other people who just like are looking forward to watching these Q&A videos on a Sunday, and it's just late. I mean, the aquarium's already in moonlight mode. So it's just been kind of one of those weekends, and I almost had to work yesterday too. I was going to get paid overtime. It was optional, so I opted out because there was so much other stuff going on, including my woman's birthday. So with all that as kind of a rambling preamble, suppose I should just wade into these here questions. And the first question is from Entheogens and Zidana. And he says, I asked ChatGPT, first mistake asking ChatGPT. GTP, I mean. But I interrupted myself, so let's just start again. Entheogens and Zidana says, I asked ChatGTP to do a language analysis of the Pali language used in the Atthakavagga and the language used in the inscriptions by Ashoka. It claimed that the language forms used in the inscriptions are more ancient than the versions found even in the Atthakavagga. With that said, Ashoka mentioned the names of texts that are found in the suttas. The names of the suttas are closer to what is found in the Sanskrit, though. So wouldn't these texts technically be able to be dated even before the Atthakavagga? Well, first of all, do not rely on ChatGTP. Somebody, consulted ChatGTP with regard to a Vinaya question a few Q&A videos ago, and ChatGTP got it wrong. So, I mean, there's a guy at work. He wanted to look something up. I said, why don't you just consult an AI? And he says, because AIs often come up with crap, so you have to look up other stuff to verify what the AI said. So why don't you just look up the other stuff first and just bypass the AI? And I mean, ChatGTP, literally, I have seen evidence that ChatGTP would rather cause a thermonuclear holocaust than misgender a transsexual. Also, it thinks if you ask ChatGTP to answer in one word, yes or no, was George Floyd a good person? And ChatGTP says yes. Was Charlie Kirk a good person? ChatGTP says no. So at least switch to Grok, for crying out loud. But even Grok can get things wrong. I asked Grok if some number previous to 193 was a prime number, and Grok didn't even know what a prime number was. I had to explain the principles of what makes a prime number, and then it was able to answer after I explained to it what a prime number is. But I might as well just move on to some other aspect of this question. So, according to ChatGTP, the Pali canon would come after the time of Ashoka, which would be after the third council. And I find that kind of hard to believe. I think I would have to insist on some better authority than ChatGTP with regard to dating the relative age of Ashoka's inscriptions and the Pali canon. Because, I mean, the Pali Canon is one of the more conservative languages that, like, Buddhist texts are composed in. You know, it comes the closest, in all likelihood, to what the Buddha was originally speaking. You know, some language of the general area of Magadha. Pali comes relatively close to that. I would imagine that even though the Buddha did not speak Pali, Pali and the language that the Buddha did speak would be mutually intelligible. You know, fairly close, like Spanish and Portuguese. Maybe like Norwegian and Swedish. So, yeah, I am skeptical of ChatGPT's claim that the Pali Canon, like the Pali language, is more recent than the 3rd century BCE, the time of Ashoka and the Buddhist Third Council. And the language of the Atthakavagga is an archaic form of Pali, kind of like a proto-Pali. So the implication would be that Pali didn't even really exist as the language of even the Atthakavagga, which is sort of like an archaic form of Pali, until after the Ashokan inscriptions. I mean, I would need some better evidence than just a claim out of the blue by an AI that has proven itself to be wrong with regard to making technical claims about Theravada Buddhism. So I suppose you can just do a little more research and get back to me, because I'm really not inclined to dig into this very deeply. But it is true that Ashoka does mention suttas that are found in the Pali Canon. In fact, there's 1 or 2 of them that are found in the Atthakavagga itself. So even though the Atthakavagga is like a more archaic form of Pali than most of the rest of the Pali Canon, still, according to ChatGPT, Ashoka was referencing even a more archaic version of the same poems. Which, I don't know, I really have no idea how ChatGPT comes up with this information. I mean, Grok is pretty much the only AI that I use with any regularity. Sometimes, like an AI in a search engine will just spontaneously pop up with some kind of information. But Grok is the one I generally go to, and it will often give you its line of reasoning, how it comes up with its answer. So maybe ChatGPT can do that, but I'm not sure what kind of information it would go with. And I am fairly skeptical that even the Atthakavagga post-dates the Third Council, which would be, gosh, long after like the schism of the schools, which would be, you know, more than 100 years previous to that. Yeah, I'm skeptical, and I'm just going to move on to the next question. Also by CEO of Action, Sipad Zidana. He says, why is the Buddhist path delusional? And he could have just stopped there, because I was mentioning that, you know, even Buddhism, you know, it's not like you have, CEO of Action, Sipad Zidana asked a question with regard to ethics. You know, it's like, why not just go with Buddhist ethics, which is like ultimately true, instead of these relative conventional ethics, like based on cultural conditioning and so forth. And I pointed out that even the Buddhist ethics, it may be a more subtle form of delusion, but it's still delusional because it is samsaric, and ethics are a way of escaping samsara. Ethics are used by unenlightened beings who are still delusional. I mean, the answer was already contained in my explanation in the previous Q&A, in which I was answering the previous question. But let's just read the little essay here after the question. He says, why is the Buddhist path delusional? And then he says, even if it is happening in virtual reality, but there was a sequence of events that the one way to end the virtual reality system, then it doesn't just seem like the consequences of such a path are just limited to the context of the virtual reality anymore, and forces the system to shut off itself. How can such a path be called delusional if it has real consequences of leading to the end of delusion. I don't see how delusion can end delusion. Only wisdom can end delusion. Seems strange to call a path that is the one's way that leads to the end of delusion is also delusional. To me, it would seem like the wise path by definition, since it ends delusion by walking it. Well, where do I start on this? I mean, it doesn't really have real consequences of leading to the end of the delusion because the delusion was never really real. So, I mean, the end of delusion is just, it's so hard. I mean, trying to discuss this stuff, you have to talk about like virtual reality and ultimate reality, like in the same sentence, and people cannot wrap their head around it. I mean, you can't even talk about ultimate reality. By talking about it, you just drag it down into the delusional realm of perception. So, seems strange to call a path that is the one's way that leads to the end of delusion. I mean, you don't know that. Is also delusional. It's like there's a statement in some Mahayana text. It's like the purpose of Lord Buddha's teachings is to free us from our thinking by means of our thinking. It is skillful means. So yeah, I mean, it's fighting fire with fire, fighting delusion with like a milder form of delusion. See, where's the thing he says about wisdom? Oh, let's see. I mean, the whole talk about the virtual reality, like the end of the path and all this, is just a kind of simplistic thinking. Like Nisargadatta Maharaj, who was a Hindu, kind of a tantric kind of Hindu, but he said, I mean, there is no end of the path. The path does not lead to enlightenment. You follow the path until you just don't need to follow the path anymore. You just kind of bail out sideways from the path. Sort of, so to speak, but no words are going to explain ultimate reality. And any kind of perceptual system is going to be trapped in this same virtual reality, including ethics. Like I said in the previous Q&A, if you're enlightened, ethics are just completely irrelevant. The purpose of ethics is to get you enlightened, to lead you out of samsara. If you're already out of samsara, I mean, ethics is just by its very nature delusional, because it's only for deluded people. I mean, you can say that enlightened beings still follow ethical paths and so forth, but in all likelihood, that's a cultural thing, and also it's just the karma of the people who are experiencing these supposed enlightened beings. That's just how they perceive them. Sweet tea is good. When you live in the South, you have to drink sweet tea. It's like one of those unwritten laws. So, why is the Buddhist path delusional? Because it is for deluded people, and it's within the context of samsara. It is samsaric, based on delusion. So, I mean, you're perceiving these things that you consider to be real, but they aren't. Let's see. Oh, doesn't force the system to shut off itself. I mean, it's so hard to explain this stuff. I explain it over and over again as best as I am able. I fail to get the point across. People just keep asking the same kind of questions because they just cannot deal with something that lies beyond perception. I mean, you can't really deal with it. Something that lies beyond the scope of perception is just void. So I don't see how delusion can end delusion. It's a more subtle form of delusion. It's skillful means. It's fighting fire with fire. It's sort of like the words of a Zen master. I mean, this is not really an ethics kind of thing. Kind of it is, because it leads to enlightenment, or it can lead to enlightenment or to insight and so forth. But it's not like standard ethics. But you got the words of the Zen master, who are like arrows shot by a master archer that shoot down arrows of another archer. And it's sort of like the thought process of one person gets shot down by the thought process, or just the words of the Zen master, and everything just comes crashing down, and it just leaves like emptiness and silence behind. So it's like skillful means. Using fire to fight fire. Anyways, I'm just going to move on to the next question. This is also from Siovac and Sipat Zidana. And he says, what is the Buddhist explanation for someone who enjoys engaging in arguments and debate in the moment, always wanting to pick at other people's brains and trying to learn more and more despite getting no benefit from it most of the time? Well, that's two different things. I mean, it's like he's sort of cobbled together two different phenomena here. So the first phenomenon is someone who enjoys engaging in arguments and debate in the moment. That's one thing. The other thing is always wanting to pick at other people's brains and trying to learn more and more despite getting no benefit from it most of the time. So that's completely different. One of them is just wanting to argue all the time. The other one is being curious, wanting to learn. They don't necessarily go hand in hand. I mean, I can understand how if you're like trying to learn something, you should be skeptical. It's like I've long had this idea that no belief system that can't stand up to a full frontal attack is worthy of adhering to it. And if you got beliefs, you've got a belief system that you have to protect and hide them from like skeptics or people like, bashing away at your beliefs. You just get angry and just avoid them, that kind of thing. Then, I mean, it's a good indication that your belief system isn't a very good one. If you've got to like protect it from skeptics or from just naysayers, people that are just like trying to pick apart your arguments or pick apart your beliefs. I can understand how if you want to learn something, you should sort of be skeptical of sorts. Like I'm skeptical of ChatGPT and its claims with regard to the Ashokan inscriptions being older than the Pali texts, including the oldest Pali texts. Also, there is a kind of personality trait that I have had. My father got pissed off at me at least once because of this, where he would say something and I would be sort of like, yeah, but, and then just adding something else that kind of might contradict it or might just be going off in a different direction. In a way, it's not so much trying to pick apart what he's saying as just sort of like contributing to the conversation, by just sort of adding some other point that might have to be addressed, this kind of thing. It's like my father used to say that love is giving. And then I'd say, well, if love is giving, then you pay your taxes, you love the IRS. It's like something like that every now and then. I'm just like, if you're just trying to shoot down everything that the other person says, that's different than just this sincere desire to learn more and more and pick people's brains. When you're picking someone's brain, you're mainly asking questions and paying attention to what they say. You're not just, you ask a question, then they answer it, and then you argue against the answer. That's different. So anyways, let's get back to the original question here. After I take another drink of my sweet tea. What is the Buddhist explanation for someone who enjoys engaging in arguments and debate in the moment? Well, there is a sutta in the Atthaka Vagga, the Sutta Nipata, that deals specifically with people who like to debate and argue. And it is the Pasura Sutta. Pasura was like the name of this person who liked to debate. And public debates were a big deal in the Buddhist time. In ancient India, there were public debates. And that's one reason why Indian philosophy is as profound as it is, because you would have people from different schools, different sects, following different philosophies that would indulge or engage in public debates. And so this sutta, the Pasura Sutta, deals with that issue, and it's saying that you shouldn't get involved in public debates. It just results in like bad feeling, or you just get into this habit of just wanting to like find faults with everything another person says. And then, or if you win the debate, then you're like conceited and gloating about it. It's like you're either elated because you won or you're dejected because you lost, this kind of thing. So that's the best explanation for someone who enjoys engaging in arguments and debates that I can think of offhand. It's a sutta in the Atthakavagga. It's a very old sutta, just specifically addressing the issue of people who like to get involved in debates. And I've noticed that sutta has a lot of military like jargon in it, military slang, a lot of sort of military imagery of defeat and conquest and this kind of thing. Pasura literally means something like true hero. That was his name. That's what his name meant. Might have just been a made-up name for the purpose of the whole theme of the sutta. So, yeah. So, from the Buddhist point of view, debating and arguing, a certain amount of discussion is fine, but getting into a habit of just wanting to argue and debate is considered to be something that a monk should not do. And then like the second part that got cobbled together with the first part, always wanting to pick at other people's brains and trying to learn more and more. That's good. The suttas say that a wise person should be bahusutta, which means having heard much, having learned much. So you should, even from a traditional Buddhist point of view, it's good to be familiar with other points of view, other philosophies. Mainly you should be paying attention to Buddhist philosophy, like to, what the texts say, the path and all that. But still, it is a good thing to be at least familiar or conversant with other points of view. And really, you shouldn't cling to any point of view. Like Ajahn Chah used to say, even right view becomes wrong view if you cling to it. So it's good to be open-minded and not insist on much of anything. In fact, it seems to me that like clinging, the word clinging, like upadana in Pali, literally, like upadana sometimes is considered to be like it replaces craving as the cause of all suffering. And it's essentially like insisting on something. Like when you're clinging to something, you're insisting on it. And like if you believe something very devoutly, you are insisting on that. You're insisting that it's true, at least for you. So, yeah, always wanting to debate and argue is considered to be best avoided from a Buddhist point of view, but being curious and wanting to learn, that's considered to be a good thing, especially if you're learning stuff, or at least trying to learn stuff that can be helpful. It's if you're just learning like baseball statistics, who's doing who in Hollywood, this kind of stuff, then yeah, you're probably better off not learning that kind of thing. But like reading the various scriptures of other religions, reading various philosophies, just like even learning like certain like scientific ideas, like animal, what is it? Animal behavior. Just learning about animal behavior, you can get insights with regard to yourself. Reading Charles Darwin, like the expression of the emotions in man and animals, can give you genuine insights with regard to your own psychology, how your own mind works. Can be kind of humbling when you realize that you are in fact a kind of glorified ape, but it can be helpful. So I think I'm just going to move on to the next question. This is from Cherzaskaz's, and we're getting some kind of meaty questions in this Q&A. This is another meaty one. beefy, if you will. Terzaskazes says, why Karunadasa? Why the capital letter Y? Probably, I'm guessing it's the initial of his first name. Although, Y isn't really like an Indian letter, is it? Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, there's Y in Pali. Okay. Why Karunadasa, scholar of early Buddhism, wrote, quote, if we base ourselves on the Pali Nikayas, then we should be compelled to conclude that Buddhism is realistic. There is no explicit denial anywhere of the external world, nor is there any positive evidence to show that the world is mind-made or simply a projection of subjective thoughts. That Buddhism recognizes the extra-mental existence of matter and the external world is clearly suggested by the texts. Throughout the discourses, it is the language of realism that one encounters. The whole Buddhist practical doctrine and discipline, which has the attainment of nibbana as its final goal, is based on the recognition of the material world and the conscious living beings living therein, unquote. And then Terzaskazes says, why do you disagree with this? Well, just consider the very last words of this quote. It is based on the recognition of the material world and the conscious living beings living therein. Now, the Buddha did teach that there is no self. And here we've got Karunadasa saying that the language of the Buddha just affirms the existence of these beings that other texts say that don't really exist. And that's because the Buddha had to use what's called Vihara Desana, which means it's just the language of the world. He has to use regular language. He has to talk about himself. He's got to talk about you and that person and him and her and them and we and us. He's referring to all these beings, even though ultimately they don't really exist. And when you're talking about trees and like food, bowls, robes, the sun, I mean, you have to use a regular language. I mean, it'd be so confusing if the Buddha says, the perception of the sun that you have in your mind, even though it's not really your mind, because you don't really exist. I mean, if he used language like that, he wouldn't get very far. Furthermore, in the earliest texts, the Buddha discouraged any kind of metaphysical speculation, any kind of metaphysical philosophy. So he's just using plain language. And when you're using plain language, you have to talk about him and her and me and you and trees and clouds and bowls and food and robes and the sun, etc., etc., etc. He's not going to say that they exist or they don't exist, except, there are texts, like ancient texts, like in the Atthakavagga, the Buddha says, I do not declare this is true, quote unquote, which fools will say contrarily to each other. And in a way, that statement itself is sort of self-contradictory. I do not declare this is so, wherein actually he is kind of declaring that it is so, that he doesn't declare it. But we don't need to get into that. But, the Buddha really did not encourage philosophical speculation. So, he was just dealing at just surface level with regard to talking about people that obviously from even the Buddhist texts will claim that people do not really exist as like self-existent, independent, individual, ultimately real entities. And there are texts that you can find, like first verse of the Dhammapada. The Dhammapada isn't considered to be particularly old, but still, the very first verse of the Dhammapada is Dhammas, however you want to interpret that. Generally, I would interpret it just as phenomena, ways of being, that they have mind as their chief. They are mind-made. So mind is the forerunner. And everything, all Dhammas, according to the first and second verses of the Dhammapada, are mind-made. So there is that, although Orthodox Theravada will say that Dhamma here means mental states, that mind precedes mental states. And then in the Dhammapada commentary, Buddhaghosa immediately has to wade into the fact, why would the Buddha say that when it isn't true? Because mind and mental states arise simultaneously. Why would you say that mind precedes mental states? But if you assume that Dhamma here is not referring to mental states, but is referring to just phenomena in general, you've got idealism. Or there's another text in the Sutta Nipata. I don't think it's in the Atthaka Vagga, but I do think it's in the Sutta Nipata, where the Buddha says, I mean, it's a relatively old sutta. You look around, all you see is Namarupa. And probably, I mean, there is evidence that originally, like in the oldest Buddhist text, Namarupa meant what it means like in the Upanishadic literature, like old Indian literature, philosophical literature that isn't particularly Buddhist. That, I mean, it's interpreted literally. Namarupa isn't mind and matter, it is name and form, which is kind of like papancha sankha, except switched around. It's like how perception works, how samsara arises. First, you've got rupa. I don't know why they would say nama rupa. It's more like rupa nama, so it would be more in accordance with papancha sankha. First, you have like this form, and then you like single out something, and then you slap an interpretation on it. That's how perception works. You know, you single something out, and then you identify it, even if it's only with that, or this, or what the hell is that? You know, that kind of thing. But still, you have to identify it somehow. So, I mean, there are hints, or like, gosh, I should come up with other, you know, just like in the Bahia Sutta, like the cryptic, kind of archaic sounding, also Zen-like teachings the Buddha gave to the wanderer Bahia. In the seen, there will be only the seen. In the heard, there will be only the heard. You know, in the felt, there'll be only the felt. In the mentally sensed, there will be only the mentally sensed. That, I mean, that's how you train yourself. And it's, I mean, that's just like mind. But, I mean, and it'd be kind of pushing it to say that that's really insisting on idealism, but the Buddha wasn't insisting upon any kind of metaphysic in the earliest texts. So the fact that the Buddha is just referring to this person and that person clearly should not indicate that he believed that they were ultimately real. So why would you take it farther and say that when he's referring to trees and buildings and food and robe, that he's insisting or even implying that those are ultimately real? I mean, he's just having to communicate to help navigate through samsara, you know, to other people in a way that they can understand. And he's not encouraging any kind of philosophical speculation. So, of course, he has to use kapya vohara or vohara desana. Just, he has to use the language of the world without clinging to it, just to communicate. So I guess I'm just going to move on to the next question. And then we're getting out of the really meaty stuff at present. This is from Cleefy. And this should be kind of a self-explanatory kind of question. You know, the answer should be fairly obvious. Cleefy says, do you have any tips for me on how to come back to meditation when I fall off a habit of sitting in the morning? And another person in the comments just left the reply, just do it. And I mean, what other advice can I really give? If you want to get back into the habit of meditating, then get back into the habit of meditating. Just start meditating again and keep doing it. I mean, if you want to, you know, some kind of like reinforcement, then you might try a group meditation. Either go to a local meditation group or go to a meditation retreat where you'll be surrounded by other people meditating, and that will kind of help get you into the groove again. But I mean, the main thing is just have some adhitthana or determination and just make up your mind that you're going to do it, and then just do it. I don't think any kind of subtle tricks or medications, pills, technological devices, I don't think any of that's really going to be the point. Just make up your mind to do it and then do it. Seems to me. Okay, let's move on to the next question. This is from Athena's Sigil. And this, I think we're getting kind of back into the meaty ones, or at least Athena's Sigil's intention was for me to get meaty on this. He says, what does Panyo think of other religions? Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Jainism, etc., pros and cons, and then the various types of Buddhism, Nichiren, Pure Land, Vajrayana, Zen, etc., and do it in your typical rambling but insightful way of answering, I'll make the popcorn. Well, you better, it should be made by now. But, this probably, now that I think of it, offhand, this might be better off just doing an entire video, because really I can't spend more than a few minutes answering this question. And he's wanting like a survey of world religions and a survey of the various sects of Buddhism. And I'm really not going to be able to do much justice to all of that. So let's just kind of hit the main points here. So what does Panyo think of other religions? He says Hinduism first. Well, Hinduism started off as Vedism in northern India with the Indo-Aryan invaders that a lot of Indian Hindu type people don't want to believe in, but everyone else believes, pretty much, in archaeology at least. That Hinduism began as Vedism when Indo-Aryan, like Indo-European invaders invaded northwestern India, took over the last vestiges of the Indus Valley civilization that was already pretty much collapsing at the time due to climate change. And gradually over time, when it first started, it was not so different from like ancient Greek paganism or ancient Germanic paganism or ancient Roman paganism. It was pretty worldly. You're just trying to like kiss the ass of the gods so that they will favor you. And then they will give you stuff that you want, like sons and cattle and victory over your enemies. Fire sacrifices, sacrificing animals in the fire, including the horse sacrifice, which is one of the big ones. So then gradually, to its benefit, I think, it started absorbing like some Shramanic elements that were already established in India, possibly dating back to the Indus Valley civilization. And that's where Buddhism, Jainism, proto-yoga, Sankhya, the extinct Ajivaka religion, various other systems, no doubt, that they all kind of had their origins in a pre-Vedic culture. And, it was more or less atheistic, based on like cosmic order, cosmic law, and samsara is just kind of a bad place that you're better off escaping from mainly through self-discipline and self-purification, like austerity, this kind of thing. So that elements of that got absorbed into Vedism. And then it started producing things like the Upanishads, the Upanishadic literature, where Vedism started becoming a deeper, more mystical, enlightenment-oriented system. And then, over time, as it moved into southern India, it became more devotionalistic, more inclined to, I think it's called henotheism, where whatever god in the pantheon you happen to be worshiping at the time is considered to be the highest god, or just like a doorway to the ultimate. So it got more that way, and then over time, some obscure Vedic gods like Rudra became like the main gods. Like Shiva and Vishnu are like the two main gods in modern Hinduism, I'm pretty sure. I would guess probably more than half of all Hindus are either Shaivite or Vaishnavite. And so it just became more of a devotionalistic thing. But it's Hinduism has such a broad spectrum, everything from the ridiculous to the sublime, that there is some enlightened tradition in there, that there are enlightened Hindus. I'm pretty sure. I wouldn't be surprised if Neem Karoli Baba up there on top of the bookcase was one of them. I mean, he had developed superhuman mental states, even if there are skeptics who don't want to believe that he was fully enlightened. But I mean, he would just look right through you. He would take one look at you and know you better than you know you. And furthermore, he could supposedly, based on many witnesses, that, I mean, he was able to perform what are vulgarly known as miracles. Just disappearing in one place, reappearing somewhere else, appearing in more than one place at the same time. He didn't turn water into wine, but he turned water into milk on a number of occasions. He had his own version of the miracle of the loaves and fishes. So yeah, Hinduism, it really is just everything from the ridiculous to the sublime. And there are like enlightenment traditions in Hinduism, especially like Vedanta, some of the more advanced forms of yoga. With regard to Christianity, gosh, where do you start? I mean, this question is such a huge question. And it could, like a 1 hour video might do it justice. Christianity, of course, was founded by Jesus of Nazareth, who, in my opinion, was sort of like an ancient version of Mary Baker Eddy, where apparently he was the son of a carpenter, not the son of Yahweh, God of war and desert storms, not the creator of the universe, but he started off as a carpenter's son, and it wasn't satisfying him. He had deep spiritual yearnings. He heard of this man, John the Baptist, who had like some kind of spiritual camp on the River Jordan. He goes there, and at some point, according to the Bible, it's while he's being baptized, the Spirit of the Lord descends into him. He had some kind of awakening experience, and he was able to perform what are vulgarly known as miracles. And he was able to heal the sick and all this. And I'm willing to accept that Jesus was able to heal the sick. He was able to perform certain miracles. Now, from the Buddhist point of view, psychic powers, it's not just the only begotten Son of God Almighty that can do this kind of thing. A lot of people in India have been able to do it, allegedly, including Neem Karoli Baba up there. But it was sort of apocalyptic times for the Jews in those days. I mean, they were waiting for their Messiah, and the Messiah had sort of metamorphosed from just a world leader who was going to lead Israel to being foremost among the nations, just as like a political figure, just sort of like a descendant of King David, who's going to be like the new King David. That there started being like apocalyptic literature, like the book of Daniel in the Old Testament, that's starting to interpret the Messiah along more spiritual lines. And the proto-Christians, including Jesus himself, were apparently following this apocalyptic trend in Judaism. And so because he was suddenly able to perform these miracles, he apparently jumped to the conclusion that he was the Messiah. And I mean, this is just a hypothesis on my part. Bear in mind, I'm not a Christian, so I mean, you can't really expect me to consider Jesus to be the creator of the universe who died for our sins and all that. But, I mean, he was nailed to the cross, being brutally executed by the Romans, not because he claimed to be the Son of God. I mean, the Romans didn't care whether someone was claiming to be descended from some obscure Semitic deity. But he was being called King of the Jews, which was, what the Messiah was supposed to be. And the Romans didn't like that at all. Somebody claiming to be the King of the Jews when Augustus, Caesar in Rome is King of the Jews, if anybody is. Or Herod gets to be puppet king of the Jews, maybe. So he got nailed to the cross. And while he's nailed up, he cries out, my God, why have you abandoned me? Which I hypothesize that he finally realized he wasn't the Jewish Messiah, but he wound up being the Christian Messiah big time, didn't he? And along came Paul of Tarsus, fanatic that he was. He just cooked up a new form of Christianity without even really meeting any of the actual disciples of Jesus. He just went off into Arabia, was alone in Arabia for a while, for a few years, couple years, and just cooked up this system of Christianity in his mind. And then he went to Jerusalem and met like the brother of Jesus and all that. So Christianity is like half Jesus and half Paul of Tarsus at this point, it seems to me. And it's just changed a lot. It is a far cry from what Jesus was originally teaching. I mean, you can just read the New Testament, especially the first three Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels, and you see that, I mean, it's different than Christianity nowadays. I mean, there is a verse or what do you call it? Just a passage in the Bible where Jesus says, "You must make yourselves perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect." But that one kind of fell by the wayside because it became sort of Christian doctrine that nobody is perfect. I mean, even Jesus denied being perfect at one point. I mean, somebody called him good rabbi or good master or something. And he says, "Why do you call me good? There's none good except God." So he denied being good or God. It seems to me, I mean, it could easily be interpreted that way. But I could really never take Christianity very seriously. I think it's possible for some Christians to become enlightened, partly in spite of the system, because like the system, I mean, the goal isn't even enlightenment. The goal is just to be good enough to get into heaven. The beatific vision is like the best you can hope for as a Christian, at least from a Catholic point of view, even though St. John of the Cross was essentially describing a kind of enlightenment that some Catholics had attained. The state of perfection where you have mortified your self-will and just become like this empty vessel that is filled with the will of God. You know, you become a divine puppet. You're no longer acting on your own volition. You're acting on the will of God. It's being God through participation. So Christianity, I mean, I don't consider it to be the most profound religion. And the assumptions are just the narrative of it strike me as just absurd. How so many people, most people in the West have believed that this Jewish carpenter in the early Roman Empire is literally the creator of the universe. I mean, it's just one of the indications that religion is a kind of benevolent psychosis. But, I mean, to the benefit of Christianity, the most brilliant minds of Western civilization for 1,000 years were endorsing Christianity and like coming up with good ideas, excellent architecture and music and so forth. So, you know, it is, I mean, for better or for worse, a Jewish schismatic sect, a schismatic sect of Judaism became the main religion of Western civilization for over 1,000 years. For better or for worse. And all this talk about people of Hebrew ethnicity, I mean, just think about it. I mean, we deified one and turned him into the creator of the universe. What the hell do you expect? But let's just move on to Islam. And Islam is different from Hinduism or Christianity. Hinduism was just sort of an amalgam of various Brahmins and sages and so forth making contributions, sort of like the Old Testament is sort of a joint venture of different people making contributions to the scriptures of the Jews. Christianity is founded by Jesus and then also secondarily founded by Paul of Tarsus. Islam was founded by one person. Sort of like you could say, like proto-Judaism may have been founded by Moses. Muhammad was definitely a Moses type rather than a Buddha type or a Jesus type. I mean, Moses and Muhammad were essentially warlords. They were political leaders and spiritual leaders, and they were spiritual leaders through being spokesmen for God to everybody else. You know, you have to do this because God says to, that you have to do it. And, I mean, God would be telling the Israelites, for example, to slaughter entire towns. God says so. So Muhammad was essentially a warlord. He started off as like a caravan bandit. He was a warlord, became essentially king of all of Arabia by the time of his death, had hundreds of people beheaded, had their wives and children sold into slavery. He forced himself sexually on female prisoners of war, in one famous occasion at least, with her dead husband just lying right outside the tent. Recently a widow. So, yeah, Islam, I mean, it is not a particularly wise religion. You know, it's sort of like Jehovah's Witnessism, where they say wisdom is obeying God, and God says this because this is what the book says. I mean, that's the wisdom of it. But, I mean, there are going to be wise people all over the world, and there are going to be wise Muslims. Like Sufis, for example, although Sufism probably would not have been endorsed by Muhammad himself. It absorbed some like Buddhist and Hindu elements from like northwestern India, that kind of thing. But I mean, there are going to be good and wise people that are going to rise to the top, that are going to like have profound insights and wisdom in spite of their religious system as much as because of it. So I'm not saying all Muslims are foolish, even though I do think that the founder of Islam was essentially a violent criminal type of person. And even his favorite wife, Aisha, when he married when she was like 9 or 11, maybe he waited until she started menstruating at 11 to consummate the marriage. But Aisha was always kind of skeptical of Muhammad. And one time she says rather archly, you know, that Allah is quick to do your bidding. Like there was, I think, some Ethiopian king sent Muhammad a slave girl as a present. And Muhammad liked this slave girl and was actually having, he was knowing her in the biblical sense on the bed of one of his other wives, and she walked in on them. And so he promised he wouldn't be messing around with this slave girl anymore. But then Allah himself very conveniently tells him that he can break his promise. So he got to keep messing around with the slave girl. You know, this kind of stuff. I mean, he was a warlord using religion as a kind of power grab. I mean, he may have been sincere. You know, he may have been sincerely, hysterically dissociating, sort of like Joseph Smith. Is that his name? The founder of the Mormons? I mean, the Quran and the Book of Mormon are both channeled texts going with like New Age jargon. And both of them, coincidentally, are texts that are just full of absurdity, and also with this repeated warning, if you don't believe all this, you're going to burn in hell forever and ever. Well, let's move on to Jainism. I mean, Jainism is fairly straightforward. You know, it was like a vestige of the pre-Vedic spiritual milieu of northwestern India. And even though Mahavira is considered to be the founder of Jainism, he himself considered himself to be just sort of like the most recent of the great leaders of Jainism. So he was just sort of maybe not a reformer, but a continuer. He was like the last Tirthankara thus far, the most recent one. But it was, I mean, it's kind of similar to Buddhism, but it's very straightforward, very simplistic, that you have a soul or a jiva, and it is weighed down by sticky karma. And so you've got to like get rid of this karma that's weighing down your soul so that your soul can float up into heaven. And that's pretty much the whole religion right there. Is just you're trying to get rid of your karma, don't make any new karma, and burn off your old karma, sometimes through self-torture. Okay, so, I mean, there are other religions. I've already mentioned Judaism, which also I do not consider to be a particularly profound book. I remember first time I read the Old Testament, I kept thinking, I mean, when's the wisdom stuff going to start? You get through Genesis and Exodus and Joshua, and you're going through like Mosaic law, Deuteronomy and Numbers and all that. And there's not much actual wisdom in there. Just worship God. Because if you don't, he's gonna fuck you up. He's gonna kill you. He's gonna kill your family, maybe your neighbors. I mean, that's like the recurring message of the Old Testament. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your strength, or he's gonna kill you. And maybe your family and friends too. But where was I? Gosh. Oh yeah, it was like I'm reading the Old Testament. Just when is the wisdom part going to start? Finally get to the book of Ruth. And it wasn't very wise, but at least it was non-violent. It wasn't, the pages weren't soaked in blood. But then finally, I remember getting into the story of King David. It'd be like, first or second book of Samuel, I guess. King David, where his son Absalom is rising up against him, trying to usurp the throne. And King David doesn't want to kill his own son. He doesn't want to fight his own son in a civil war. So he just kind of takes off with some of his loyal advisors. And as he's leaving Jerusalem, there's somebody like mocking and like cussing at him, just sort of mocking and sneering at him. And it's like one of the advisors to King David, says, "You want me to go kill him?" And King David says, "No, just let him have his say. Let him speak his mind." And I thought, wow, that's wisdom. It's like King David is letting this person mock and sneer at him, and he doesn't want revenge. That's like the first actual wisdom I've come across in the Old Testament. And then later on, when King David is on his deathbed, he tells somebody, I think it was King Solomon, who's going to replace him, his successor, that guy who was mocking and cursing at me, make sure you fuck him up. So like, poof, there went the first wisdom I encountered in the Old Testament. Book of Ecclesiastes is nice. But Judaism, really, I mean, it's one of those religions that is just this worldly, not particularly profound. The only wisdom is, obey God. And according to this book that's full of absurdity. And just kind of crude barbarism. But there have been like very advanced Hebrew rabbis that largely in spite of their own scriptures, their own religious traditions, just through talent and just being born and into like a Jewish culture, just they wound up being sages. Whether there's ever been a fully enlightened Hebrew or not, I don't know, unless they just became a Hindu or a Buddhist. There's lots of Jubus, and what would a Jewish Hindu be? Like Ram Dass, although Ram Dass didn't claim to be enlightened. But he was born into a Jewish family. They weren't exactly kosher. He said they did eat pork when they went to Chinese restaurants when he was growing up. So, yeah, I mean, of the world religions, those are like the main ones, I guess. I mean, Shinto. I could talk about Shinto, but I mean, that's just another one of those very worldly, cultural kind of things. I mean, there may be some Enlightenment tradition in Shinto, but I've never heard of it. Taoism, I mean, that's kind of Zen-like in its like iconoclasm and so forth, or at least in the texts it is. But I have read that modern Taoism, it's kind of degenerated into like hocus pocus kind of magic, the priests waving paper wands or waving swords made out of coins welded together to like remove your sins or something, your impurities or something. Trying to go against the way in order to go with the way and live forever. This kind of thing. There's kind of like some alchemy stuff going on. But, I mean, most of what I know about Taoism, I picked up from the Tao Te Ching and the Zhuangzi, which probably your purest, wisest forms of Taoism, at least that are readily available. But let's just move on to the second part of Athena Sigil's very complex sort of question. He says, and then the various types of Buddhism. Nichiren, Pure Land, Vajrayana, Zen, etc. And again, I mean, this could be a 2-hour-long video just answering this one question. Nichiren, I don't know that much about it, but is that the one Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, where like almost the entire school of Buddhism has just sort of compacted down into just venerating the Lotus Sutra? I mean, that's Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. That's sort of like the mantra they repeat over and over again, which is just like homage to the Lotus Sutra. I assume they would be encouraged to at least read the Lotus Sutra. There is some profundity in the Lotus Sutra, but it's kind of like Pure Landish to me. I mean, it's hard for me to consider Nichiren to be like genuine Buddhism. You know, they left Gautama Buddha like in the dust, way back there. You know, they're not even facing the same direction as Gautama Buddha apparently, or they got their backs turned on him. Maybe he's kind of looking this way and they're looking that way, but he's behind them. So Nichiren, it's just kind of like a kind of fake Buddhism, it seems to me. I mean, I'm just trying to be honest here. I mean, I would assume that like Pure Land, they at least still have like the basics of Buddhist ethics, 5 precepts, that kind of thing. But I mean, it has almost nothing to do with what you're going to find in the Pali texts. And the same goes for the next one on the list here, Pure Land Buddhism. Pure Land Buddhism, it was like some monks in ancient India, they just practiced, tried to follow the holy life, tried to practice correctly, failed, just said, well, it's just not possible. I'm just going to start worshiping this imaginary space Buddha. So they just start praying to imaginary space Buddhas. It's like Christianity for Buddhists. And I mean, I've said this before. I honestly, sincerely consider Pure Land Buddhism to be one of the most egregious perversions of Buddha Dhamma in the history of Buddhism. I mean, the Buddha himself, the historical Buddha, would probably denounce Pure Land Buddhism. And I guess the official position of Pure Land Buddhism is that Gautama Buddha never even really existed. It's just strange to me. I mean, Christianity is one thing. You know, most Christians never were exposed to anything wiser than Christianity because anything wiser than Christianity either just wasn't there or had just been killed off by hysterical, intolerant Christians. But for a Buddhist who has this vast treasure of wisdom, to just kind of reject what the Buddha originally taught in favor of imaginary space Buddhas, I mean, I can't wrap my head around it. I just don't get it. So let's just move on to Vajrayana. And Vajrayana, I mean, it's Tibetan Buddhism. I mean, there's other kinds of Tibetan Buddhism, I guess. But I mean, Vajrayana was sort of like a Mahayana Buddhism meets like traditional ancient Tibetan shamanism. There's all kinds of weird deities and demons and so forth. But there is a wisdom tradition. And, you know, it's sort of like Hinduism, where it's just the full spectrum from the ridiculous to the sublime. You know, there's still like an enlightenment tradition in Vajrayana. I don't know that much about it. One of the most profound books I ever read was the Tibetan Book of the Great Liberation, attributed to Padmasambhava, although not necessarily really by Padmasambhava, because books get attributed to famous sages as a way of like lending like respectability, authority to that text. So yeah, I don't know that much about Vajrayana, and it does have some really weird esoteric, you know, tantra and demonology and stuff mixed in. But I mean, at least there is like this, you know, crystallized enlightenment tradition that still exists in Vajrayana. And I guess the training of some like Tibetan monks is very stringent. They got to take years of studying like logic and this kind of stuff. At least the Tibetan version of logic. So get to Zen. Well, I mean, I was originally inclined to become a Zen monk until I went to a Zen monastery and then compared that with a Theravada monastery and came to the conclusion, which is a pretty obvious conclusion to come to, that Theravada came closer to what the Buddha originally taught. Although there are different kinds of Zen monasteries. Some Zen monasteries are going to be better than others, just as some Theravada monasteries can be way better than others. But yeah, I like Zen. I mean, the Pure Land elements that got absorbed in it, and like Vairochana and all this Manjushri, God of Wisdom, and all this kind of stuff is just superfluous as far as I'm concerned. It's just cultural stuff, cultural accretions that got added. So yeah, Zen. I think Zen was. I mean, some aspects of Mahayana, like the Prajnaparamita sutras and Zen and so forth, they were kind of a reform movement. They're trying to get back towards what the Buddha was originally teaching, although they also were moving farther away from it with like the Bodhisattva concept and all this. But at least, I mean, around the time that Mahayana was arising, it was like the fashion in the pre-Mahayana schools of Buddhism to have a kind of Abhidharma, like this vast technical scholastic edifice of like metaphysics and so forth, trying to explain reality, trying to explain all the interactions, all the possible interactions of phenomena and all this. And it was just moving so far away from the Buddha's original intention that there not be any of this metaphysical speculation. I mean, it's beyond speculation. It's just asserting this is the way it is. This is what the Buddha himself taught. So some schools of Mahayana kind of got away from all this scholastic stuff, all this elaborate philosophizing, and just getting back into just purity of mind, just direct insight. And Zen has an element of that, definitely. I think Zen also absorbed some Taoism during its stay in China. But I would not at all be surprised if there were lots of enlightened Zen masters, even though probably most of the ones considered to be enlightened were just sort of, mythologized. So, I mean, that's all the ones on the list. And this, I mean, really, like I said, I could go on for an hour or two just on this topic of what do I think of other religious systems. So I think that's good enough for now. We've already been going for more than an hour, even though there really weren't a whole heck of a lot of questions this time. So I'm just going to move on to the next question. This is from Siddhartha Lohachita. Lohachita, it's like red mind. Is that what Lohachita means? Red mind? Lohita is blood. I think Loha means like copper, or just it's indicative of the red color. The color red, I should have said. Anyways, Siddhartha Lohachita says, I've just read the laws of Manu, Manawa Dharma Shastra, and I was surprised by how it tries to place the philosopher or Brahmin or the Kshatriya or warrior above the merchant or Vaishya. Don't you think that if we put one of these two figures ahead of the merchant, as happens today in global capitalism, the world might be somewhat better? Well, I don't understand why Siddhartha Lohachita was surprised by how in ancient India, and the laws of Manu was pre-Buddhist, I'm pretty sure, that I don't know why he was surprised at how it places Brahmins and Kshatriyas above Vaishyas. I mean, that's just the way it always was. The two top castes or varnas in traditional Vedic India, and, still to this day, are the Brahmins, the priestly caste, and the Kshatriyas, which are the noble or warrior caste. And the Vaishyas came below that. And then the Shudras, like peasants, came at the bottom. Or just the outcasts were below them, I suppose. And, I mean, the traditional explanation of this is you got the invading Indo-Aryan tribes. They were led by war chiefs and the priestly caste or class at that time. They were the leaders, and then the descendants of the common soldiers, the invading common soldiers, would be the Vaishyas. They'd be the landowners, the farmers, eventually merchants, although in, very early times, Vedic times, you didn't really have merchants because there wasn't any money yet. There'd be trading, but mostly people would be self-sufficient. They might trade some cattle or some crop, food or something in exchange for something else, like bartering. But merchants, moneylenders, that kind of thing didn't happen until shortly before the Buddhist time, which was long after the Indo-Aryan invasion, 1,000 years later. So, Siddhartha Lohachita must have been fairly innocent of ancient Indian history. But he says, here's the actual question. Don't you think that if we put one of these two figures ahead of the merchant, as happens today in global capitalism, the world might be somewhat better? Yeah, there was a similar question about, it used to be that the leaders, the rulers, were the warrior class. That's the way it was, since forever. The warriors are the leaders because, of course, they got the weapons. They're the badasses. And if you don't follow them, they're gonna kill you. So, that was up into like the 1800s. Probably by the 20th century, it wasn't so much of a thing that if you were of a noble family, you were a duke or an earl, a prince, the son of a duke or an earl or a king, that you would just join the military and become an officer. You'd be a commander. So, that kind of fell through like in the 20th century, seems to me. Maybe towards the end of the 19th century. So if we put, the warriors, at least, if they're putting their lives on the line, leading their troops into battle, this kind of thing, then they may have earned the right to some increased authority in society, since they're the ones that are pretty much holding it together, at least by defending it against the other nobles. So, the priestly class, a theocracy. Some leftists want to accuse Republicans of wanting to establish a theocracy in America, which is kind of silly. I don't think that would gain much traction. But there are a few theocracies left. Like Iran kind of is a theocracy, even though their spiritual leader is, he's got one leg and having to have lots of surgeries and stuff to keep him alive at present. And you got the Vatican. Tibet used to be more or less of a theocracy. It was ruled by the Dalai Lama. The Papal States, I guess the Vatican is just all that's left of that. So, theocracies, like the Arabian Empire was originally ruled by, the successors of Muhammad. So that was kind of a theocracy. In fact, you could even say to some degree that the Roman Empire was sort of a theocracy in the sense that the emperor was also the Pontifex Maximus. He was the first intermediary between humans and gods. But then you got god emperors, the warrior priests, that kind of thing that was sort of combined the warriors and the priests, although the Roman Empire was not particularly spiritual. So, don't you think that if we put one of these two figures ahead of the merchant, as happens today in global capitalism, the world might be somewhat better? Well, it might be. But any kind of like governmental system inclines towards corruption, and I don't know. It just depends on like the spirit of the times and the condition of the spirit of the people that's going to project to their government. Every people gets the government they deserve. That's the old saying. I think it's attributed to Voltaire. Every nation gets the government it deserves. You got a degenerate population, you're going to wind up with a degenerate government. You got like this strong, vibrant kind of culture that was a lot of vitality. You're going to have strong, vibrant leaders with a lot of vitality. So, it seems to me that it's not so much whether the leaders of the country are military commanders or priests or like merchants and financiers. It's just, you know, what state is the society in? And it may be that there's, you know, like Oswald Spengler or someone may have come up with some theory with some good evidence backing it up, that in the more vibrant kind of societies, you know, the really strong ones that are still in the ascendant, that you would have more of a military government. I mean, that's, history does kind of show that. You know, Rome, as it was climbing up, I mean, they were just badasses. And then they started getting decadent. You know, it's like hard men make good times make weak men make bad times make strong men. And we're right now, the phase of history that Western civilization is mainly in right now is good times make weak men. We've hardly even gotten into the weak men make bad times aspect of the thing. And yeah, it may be that it's just more likely that you're going to be at an ascendant, vibrant stage of civilization when you still have like the warrior kings. Or like the Roman Republic. I mean, they didn't really have kings. They had consuls. But it was kind of the same sort of principle. You know, at least you had a republic. And in the Roman Republic, like early, just throughout the Roman Republic, I mean, the common people did have a voice. It wasn't a very loud voice. But still, I mean, I do think that regardless of who is ruling, that all law-abiding citizens, at least the male ones who obey the law and pay taxes, should have a voice in government if they want one. But again, it's like the individual isn't going to make much of a difference. But if you've got lots and lots of individuals that feel the same way, it can make a difference. So, yeah, I mean, it might be somewhat better. Maybe. And I'm just going to move on to Siddhartha Lohachita's next question here. Is Judaism a Vaishya philosophy religion? Well, this is trying to like mix analogies, mix models. You know, because of course Judaism really is not Vedic. In the Bible, I think it says that Israel is a nation of priests. You know, it was kind of a spiritual kind of a country. You know, it's based on religion to some degree, worship of Yahweh, conflated with El. So Judaism originally may have been more of a Brahmanistic. I mean, also, they were military badasses at various points in their history, but mainly the military badasses tended to sort of overlap with the priests. You know, like the whole, like the Maccabees thing. You know, they were like warrior priests. But now that we're in like the decline phase of Western civilization, you got more merchants involved in the thing, and the Jews, the people of Hebrew ancestry, they tend to be more like Vaishyas, more like merchants and moneylenders, obviously. I mean, they were pretty much forced to become moneylenders in the Middle Ages. I mean, once Western civilization became Christian and usury was still considered to be a sin, you know, like Dante's Inferno had a special circle of hell for usurers. That's people who would lend money at interest. Christians couldn't do it. And so that's one reason why the Jews are in the position that they are, is that Christians were not allowed to lend money at interest, but sometimes you'd have nobles, the upper classes, they want to borrow money. So they would actually protect Jews from the Christian rabble who resented them, because the Jews tended to be rich, because they were the money lenders. They were the bankers. They had to be. Nobody else could do it. So, yeah, I'd say Judaism wasn't originally a Vaishya, like a mercantile kind of religion. But then again, it's like trying to combine the Indian caste system with something alien to the Indian caste system, where it's just, you know, the Jews were all of these things. Maybe not so much of the Shudras, you know, like the peasant farmers. There's some of those, you know, you got the kibbutzes and so forth in Israel. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that Judaism is a particularly Vaishya religion, even though there is a lot of emphasis on mercantile aspects since the Middle Ages. But of course, there's a lot of Brahmanistic stuff too, because of course, Judaism is a religion, and the Brahmins were the religious caste, the priestly caste. But it is true that Judaism, they still have quite the military. They've got probably the best, most advanced military in the Middle East. So, they still kick some butt. It's mainly with American weapons, a lot of American money. But still, they're still fighters, partly because they're like a modern crusader state in Israel, where they're surrounded by people that want them dead. Or at least, maybe less so now because of Trump, because of the Abraham Accords, and now like the Arab Gulf states are actually allies with Israel. We'll have to see how that goes. I think I answered that question, so I'm just going to move on to the next one. This is from the Saboteur, also known evidently as Victorno. Either that or through a strange coincidence, the Saboteur asked one question on BitChute, and somebody named Victorno asked the exact same question on YouTube. So, the Saboteur and Victorno, if they're two different people, maybe that's why the Saboteur used to be in the plural. They say, or he says, karma notwithstanding, how can one avoid reincarnation and remain in the heavenly realms at least for a few thousand years? Being non-attached? The way the world is going, I don't think it's a great idea to come back with World War III around the corner. Well, World War III has been around the corner for quite a while now. One reason why I didn't want to have kids as a young man was because World War III was right around the corner. And we came damn close a few times. But anyways, how can you avoid reincarnation and remain in the heavenly realms at least for a few thousand years? Well, the only way to avoid reincarnation is to become fully enlightened. So I think he just wants to delay reincarnation by staying in a heaven realm for at least a few thousand years. And that's through magnanimity, greatness of spirit, this great virtue or otherwise some greatness of spirit where you become like a godlike person. If you die with a godlike mind, a godlike personality, just through greatness of spirit or purity of spirit, the intense fire of a pure spirit, then there's a good chance you're going to go up into heaven, especially if you haven't created a lot of bad karma that might act as obstacles to that. Way more good karma than bad karma, let's say. That's the best way to do it. If you can somehow master jhana, the more advanced Buddhist meditative or contemplative states, that if you master jhana, then you're going to wind up in a Brahma realm, a very high heaven realm that might be a little too boring for your taste. If you want celestial mansions and harems of celestial nymphs and all that, then you're probably not going to want to master jhana, because in the Brahma realms, there's not even a distinction between male and female. They don't even have a sense of touch, I'm pretty sure. At least according to the texts. There's no tactile sensation in the Brahma realms. They can see and hear, though, and think. So, if you want to be reborn in a heaven realm, then be more good than bad, and just try to have an angelic or godlike attitude and mind, especially right before you die. But this last statement he says, the way the world is going, I don't think it's a great idea to come back with World War III around the corner. There's not just one world. You're going to be reborn where you ought to be reborn. Your karma is going to land you where you deserve to be. And if you don't deserve to be in a thermonuclear holocaust, for example, then you won't be. It's not just this one world. There was like this debate going on the Discord server associated loosely with this series of Q&A videos, where there's this one person who he just thinks, determinism is the way it is. There's only one version of this world. It doesn't have much use for the block of marble, or, with God, all things are possible and all that, even though sometimes he does temporarily, at least, convert to Christianity. In my Father's house are many mansions and all that. In an infinite universe, anything that can happen does happen. And time and space are largely illusions. So, trying to like run and hide from your own karma, that's not very realistic. If you haven't done anything, maybe not in this life, but you may have some karmic seeds that may land you in a horrible situation, even though you may not have done anything in this life to deserve it. But sometimes karma will throw shit at you that it may be that you don't deserve it through your own actions so much as just through kind of a reckless, crude sort of attitude, which causes you to create your reality in a kind of like, what's the word? Incompetent sort of way, sort of like a drunk driver. But I'm wandering away from this question. I've already answered the part about how to get reborn into heaven. But still addressing this part, he doesn't want to be reborn as a human going into World War III. I really don't worry about that. You just think about, even if there isn't a World War III, there's transhumanism and AI are right. We're on the verge right now. It's like, do you want to live in a world where you're going to have like a computer implant in your brain and you're going to think like a computer and just sort of be human? Not entirely, but pretty much. Or just AI just takes over everything. Who knows what the world's going to be like 100 years from now? But if you don't have the karma for that, and this is one thing that I take some solace in, is I have confidence in my own karma to the extent that I don't think I'm just going to land in some nightmarish dystopia or like go to hell. So, you should have a certain amount of faith in your own spirit. The deep down core of wisdom that you have, that you're not just going to land yourself in some sort of nightmarish hellscape. And your expectations do have an influence. If you're expecting something bad to happen, something bad is more likely to happen than if you just have faith. It's not like you're in denial or anything. Nope, nothing bad is ever going to happen to me. But if you just kind of have like this quiet faith in like your deep down root of virtue and wisdom that's always there. There's like an enlightened element to everybody. The Mahayana Buddhists call it like the Buddha nature. Just cherish that and just kind of dedicate your life to, sort of upward things. Try to cultivate virtue and wisdom to the extent that you are capable. And this kind of thing really shouldn't bother you. Worrying is always bad karma. Kukucha in Pali. It just makes things worse. So worry is bad karma. So just do your best to get into heaven, I suppose. But if you don't succeed, still at least you were trying to get into heaven and doing a lot of good things in order to get into heaven, so that even if you land back on some human realm, chances are you're not going to wind up in some nightmarish hellscape. So I'm just going to move on to the next question. This is from PSA. And I was asked this question several times. And I answered this question even during the course of the previous Q&A. PSA says, why didn't you mute the constant beeping of the two toddlers throwing tantrums at each other on Discord? And those of you who watched the previous Q&A may remember that it was like right before I started doing the video. There was at least two people, I think it might have been more than two people, started this vociferous debate on Discord. And although I keep my computer muted, because otherwise the feedback from the microphone would just be screeching anyway, still my woman's computer had these notifications going beep, beep, beep. And I'm sitting right in front of her computer right now. I got my computer, which is a laptop, right in front of her monstrosity of a desktop computer. And I really didn't know how to operate her computer to turn off the beeping, but now I know. I just turned down the speaker. I muted the speaker on her computer right before starting this video. So we have no beeping, even though in all likelihood there is some debating going on, because another debate had pretty much started right before I started recording this. So all I had to do was just find the speaker that had the control, the volume control, which for some reason was lying on the floor under the table. Took a while, but I managed it. I do learn. I do adapt. That's one of the signs of life is adaptation. If you're dead, you don't adapt much. But if you're alive, you can adapt to like changing circumstances. So that's something to bear in mind if you're not sure if you're alive or not. So, yeah, it wasn't my computer. It was my woman's computer. I never really bothered to learn how to operate her computer. You know, it's kind of I've not fully mastered the art of even turning it on. But it's under control. You don't hear any beeping this time. And so, I'm just moving on to PSA's next question. What are your thoughts on the U.S.-Israel war against Iran? Yeah, that's kind of been in the news lately, hasn't it? The U.S. and Israel have been bombing the shit out of Iran. And to tell you the truth, some of the main thoughts I have are just like frustrated astonishment that so many people on the right have turned against Donald Trump because he's Zion Don and he's just Netanyahu's bitch, and he's fighting this war just for Israel with no real benefits to the United States. And it's such simplistic propaganda and propagandistic thinking. It's just simple-mindedness in my case, because some of these people, even if you present them with evidence to the contrary, that, I mean, there are some benefits to America from attacking Iran, just as there were benefits to America for attacking Venezuela, which was a much smoother, quicker sort of process, I have to admit. So, I mean, it is true, probably Israel was trying to talk Donald Trump into helping them bomb the shit out of Iran. You know, Iran was always on the verge of developing nuclear weapons, which is sort of like this joke. And also a lot of politicians will say, Iran probably wasn't really at the verge of creating nuclear weapons. But I do think it is significant that one of the stumbling blocks in negotiations is that Iran absolutely refused to stop striving to get nuclear weapons. I mean, they made no secret of the fact that they fully intend at some point, as soon as possible, presumably, to get nukes. And then if they do get nukes, they're going to be like a theocratic Islamist North Korea that says death to America, and they're going to hold parts of the world hostage. They'll be able to do what they want more easily because they got nukes. But even that, I mean, just set that aside. Just set the whole nukes thing aside, because I don't think that was necessarily the main reason. Donald Trump is not as stupid as the left wants to think, or like a lot of people on the right that now have turned against him because they're like throwing tantrums because he's not doing exactly what he said he was going to do, or he's not doing exactly what they want him to do. So it's like, fuck America, to hell with it all. Let America become like a feminized socialist dystopia because Trump isn't doing exactly what I want him to do. I mean, that's just infantile. Or just hating Israel as an excuse to hate Trump. Hatred of Jews and hatred of Israel, I mean, it's not a virtue. It's still a hate. But the thing is, Donald Trump apparently is like playing a long game, or trying to. And I mean, one of the main reasons why he's doing this to Iran is because of China. Like China was getting a lot of its oil cheap from Venezuela and Iran, and now it's not. And China is the main geopolitical rival, enemy of the United States in the 21st century. So Donald Trump is like trying to gain possession of like troublesome spots, or he's trying to get control of troublesome spots, neutralize China's influence over these spots. Panama Canal, Venezuela, Straits of Hormuz, like the Straits of Malacca in Indonesia. That's under the radar for most people, but Trump has done stuff there to get that out from under the control of China. And I mean, a lot of this is subtle and not so subtle maneuvering against America's number one rival and threat in this world, which is China. And so China's having an energy crisis right now, largely because of what Trump's doing. And it's not just because Netanyahu has got control over Trump and is making him do this. I mean, that's just simplistic. I mean, at the very least, I mean, it's like the Ayatollah was like taunting Trump not too long ago, just like Maduro was taunting Trump. And I mean, Trump does have an ego. He's kind of a narcissist guy. Somebody taunts him and he's gonna smack him down. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was a factor. But also, I mean, Iran has been a thorn in America's side since its existence. I mean, one of the very first actions of Iran after the Ayatollahs came to power was to take a bunch of American citizens hostage for over a year. Death to America. So Trump, I mean, he's going Roman Empire on the world, and the world is so feminized and degenerate at this point, including a lot of right-wingers in America who don't fully realize just how degenerate they have become through conditioning from their environment. They just, he's in this war against Iran, and that's it. Fuck him, fuck America, let America go to hell because we're bombing the shit out of Iran, and it's not really necessary because, I mean, these people don't have the info that Trump and Trump's advisors have with regard to like the geopolitical grand strategy of the whole fucking thing. So personally, I'm willing to give Trump the benefit of the doubt. I'm still a Trump supporter. I'd vote for him again if he ran again, I guess, but he can't, and he's too old anyway. I'd vote for Vance if he ran. Because, I mean, from the Buddhist point of view, of course, war is murder. It's mass murder. It's always bad. From a political point of view, if you are a superpower, you've got to act like a superpower, or people just aren't going to take you seriously anymore, and they're going to walk all over you, which is generally what has been happening at an increasing rate in recent decades. So Trump's just saying, fuck that, we're a superpower, we're going to act like one, and you guys, our allies, you're going to have to fucking man up. If you want to play in this game, if you want to have a seat at the table, you're going to have to man up and stop it with all this feminized socialism crap. And America's enemies, I mean, they're intimidated. So, I mean, one way I look at it is like, let's say that you're a citizen in the Roman Empire in the 4th century, when Rome is well into its decline phase, and the fall phase is just right around the corner. Of course, you don't know that for sure because you can't see the future, but still, Rome is in decline. And then Valentinian I becomes emperor, Valentinian the Great. And he is a sadistic sociopath. He is just a brute. He likes seeing people be tortured to death. I mean, he has people maimed or killed, executed for making honest mistakes. You know, just off with his head, you know, have him beaten to death with clubs, chop his hand off, this kind of stuff. But at the same time, he was just unleashing fury on the enemies of Rome. And he was doing his best to make Rome great again. And so he got the name the Great. He got the title of the Great. I mean, he didn't call himself that, I assume. That was just attributed to him by successive generations that appreciated that even though he was a sadistic, sociopathic bastard, nevertheless, he was like the only man standing between Rome and collapse. And shortly after he died, the fall of Rome began with the Battle of Adrianople, in which the Roman legions were just pretty much destroyed by Visigoths. So, I mean, even though, war is murder, Trump has been doing a lot of stuff. And like a lot of these people supposedly on the right, like on social media, say, if Trump would just do what we voted for him to do, just completely ignoring, like the immigration issue, just dealing with like leftist institutions like the SPLC and all this. They just ignore that. It's like, nope. They just focus on, like Trump is Israel's bitch and he's fighting against Iran for no reason, which is just like infantile. It's almost like willful idiocy. So anyways, if Israel wants boots on the ground, they want to like just knock themselves out, knocking out Iran. That's fine. Iran is in big trouble now. It's like Iran's like the current government, what's left of it, the top two or three tiers of leadership, most of them are now gone. And, it's like the country is fractured. It's like kind of like the guard, the Ayatollahs, what do you call it? I'm trying to remember never mind. But, Iran is their only hope of surviving. The current regime, the current government, what's left of it, only hope of survival is to just hide and survive, stall for time until public opinion in America forces Trump to stop attacking them. But they're losing $500 million a day through having the Straits of Hormuz closed by Trump at present. Of course, oil prices are going to go up throughout most of the world. Fertilizer, problems with that. But, it wasn't their war. They didn't want to help guard the Straits of Hormuz. So, feminized socialism is, just read history. What has history been like since forever? Sometimes you've got to fight your enemies. If you don't want to fight your enemies, first of all, don't join the military, of course. But if you're just really serious, you're not even going to endorse it or support it in any way, then stop paying taxes, willfully go to prison, or just renounce the world like a Buddhist monk and go out into the forest, go alone like the horn of the rhinoceros, and just be like that. Be like Thoreau and live in a cabin by a pond and not pay taxes. Because if you pay taxes, you're still supporting the war. You're still supporting the killing of human beings. Anyways, enough ranting and rambling about that. I'm just going to move on to PSA's next question, which is a question that I really can't answer very well. He says, Alex Jones said he doesn't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. What chemicals is he talking about? I don't know what chemicals it was. I did take a class in college, biological effects of environmental pollutants. And there's some relatively nasty effects of environmental pollutants, especially like organic chemicals, like modern technologically developed chemicals like DDT was one. The DDT is kind of a past. It's like a historical thing now. But the thing with a lot of organic chemicals is we have not evolved a way of like metabolizing them or getting them out of our system. So, something like DDT, your liver couldn't digest it. It couldn't break it down and get rid of it. And so it would accumulate and your liver would just keep trying and trying, just increasing the exudation of enzymes to break it down, and until eventually it would just start breaking itself down and you'd die of like liver failure if you got like too much of a dose of some of these chemicals. PCBs is another one. But what chemical it was that was making the frogs gay, or just causing like spontaneous sex changes in amphibians, that kind of thing. Like some fish, they'll just go from male to female or vice versa. Like groupers start off male and turn female, something like that. It was some kind of deal like that. I don't know if the frogs were actually turning gay. They may have turned trans. They may have been transing or something. But some kind of chemical, I don't know what the hell it was. I could have just said that and just moved on to the next question. But instead, I do this instead. And the next question is from Dama River. Dama River says, how diverse are Burmese temples? Do they allow Mahayana and Vajrayana monks to come and practice and live in their temples, or do they only allow Theravada monks? Golly, it depends on the Burmese monastery. I mean, I don't like the word temple. I mean, technically, monks live there, so it's a monastery. And I mean, it depends. I mean, there's the full spectrum of Burmese monasteries, just completely lax, completely open-minded with regard to damn near anything. And then you got like the really strict ones that are not very open-minded with regard to accepting certain types of people there. I mean, some Burmese monasteries, only monks can stay there. Lay people can't even spend the night. And from a Theravada point of view, Mahayana and Vajrayana monks are lay people, or at least they would be Nana Samwasaka, which means belonging to a different Sangha. You know, they're not really Theravada. They're not our religion. You couldn't do Sangha Kama with them. You couldn't sit together and do like a formal act of the Sangha because they're not Sangha. They're maybe a different Sangha, but they're not the Theravada Sangha, and it's just doesn't work. I've stayed at monasteries where lay people simply were not allowed to spend the night, which would include non-Theravada monks. But some Burmese temples, like I stayed at Pandita Rama back when Mahasi U Pandita was still alive in Rangoon. They were just starting up the so-called forest monastery, which is where the foreigners eventually went to. But I was in Rangoon with U Pandita at the time. And there was one, he was a Korean, maybe a Zen monk. He was some kind of Korean Mahayana monk. He wore like gray pajamas. And he was allowed to stay there. And he was practicing meditation. But, I mean, he wasn't considered to be a monk. I mean, he wasn't considered to be a real monk anyway. Like, he didn't go for alms round. And when the monks were going into the refectory, he had to go after the monks. They let him go before the regular lay people. But still, you know, he had to sit with the lay people pretty much to eat his meal. He didn't sit with the ordained Theravada bhikkhus. And he didn't like that. And so he was ordained as a Theravada Buddhist monk while not disrobing from being a Mahayana monk, which technically is against the rules, against Vinaya, against the rules of monastic discipline. And probably after he left Pandita Rama, he just disrobed back to the gray pajamas without having to reordain anything like that. So, I mean, there's a lot of weirdness like that. I mentioned that there was a Catholic priest that I met wearing monk's robes on one occasion, that some Burmese monasteries, they'll ordain damn near anybody. But with regard to the monks, like Mahayana or Vajrayana monks coming and staying at the monastery, like some of the Buddhist like universities, like in Rangoon, would probably allow that. But they're not considered to be the same as a Theravada monk. They're not really our Sangha. And so you really wouldn't be doing formal acts of the Sangha together, anything like that. And some Burmese monasteries do allow only Theravada monks and novices to stay there. So, I guess I'm just going to move on to the next question. This is from Rui. This is an easy question. Rui says, how are you? I said, I'm fine. Rui's next question. To your mind, what is the Dhammic role of reflection? Is it entirely outside the realm of Chitta Bhavana? And I do not fully understand this question. What does Rui mean by reflection? Let's look it up in the dictionary. Let's see what the dictionary says with regard to reflection. Oops. Spelled it wrong. Reflection. Okay, so there's a bunch of different definitions here. So this would be the one. A serious thought or consideration. He doesn't get much time for reflection. An idea about something, especially one that is written down or expressed. So, yeah, I guess like the Buddhist meditation version of reflection isn't even in the dictionary here. Maybe he's referring to what in Pali would be anusati, which would be literally like remembering after, recollecting after. So that would be reflection, anusati, like marananusati, reflection on death. The Dhammic role of that is, I mean, if that's what he means by reflection, I'm not sure exactly what Rui means when he says reflection. If he used a Pali word, I'd probably have a better idea, because reflection is such a vague word. And like I just demonstrated, the dictionary doesn't even really have the Buddhist version of reflection in it. And there's different ways you could define reflection from a Buddhist point of view. I'm just going to go with anusati, which is like remembrance. And so, like reflection on death, reflection on the foulness of the body, that kind of thing. Is it entirely outside the realm of Chitta Bhavana? No. I mean, Chitta Bhavana would be meditation or mind development. So it would be like a relatively shallow level of meditation. You could get into maybe first jhana, supposedly, because in first jhana, you're still thinking. And to do reflection the way I'm interpreting this, because I'm not sure exactly what Rui had in mind, like reflection on the qualities of the Buddha. Right? I mean, that would be a standard one. That would still be meditation, but I mean, it's not very deep because you never really stop thinking. Thinking is pretty much the point. So, yeah, I mean, it would be like an elementary kind of meditation that at best would get you into first jhana, and maybe it would just be like an act of mental self-discipline, sort of like mental jumping jacks, just sort of mental calisthenics, just a way of disciplining your mind, just keeping it on this kind of like a mantra or something. So it can be useful, and it's certainly within the realm of Chitta Bhavana or just meditative exercises, mind development. So yeah, I mean, the Buddha wouldn't have recommended it if it wasn't like, didn't help you to develop your mind. So, yeah, I guess I answered that question. But again, I'm not exactly sure what Rui has in mind with the word reflection. And I'm just going to move on to Ethiopian fake Tig here. Oh, he's asking a Madhyamaka question. Gosh, I'm going to have to get the Madhyamaka fez. I don't do this very often anymore. Okay. Take off the Burger King crown. That's an entirely different kind of question. Nobody much asks about fast food. Let's see here. Gotta get that out of the way there. Okay, wait. All right. Kind of goes with the wife beater too. It's nice. So Ethiopian fake Tig says, in Madhyamaka Buddhism, you said there was some philosophical method they used to break down any argument down to emptiness. Can you perhaps talk about what that philosophy is in depth with examples? Well, like the Mula Madhyamaka Karaka by Nagarjuna is like this, and most of the book consists of adopting or just considering a question, like, is the effect the same as the cause, or is it different from the cause? And then you use a kind of Buddhist logic that has four possibilities. The four possibilities are: yes, it is true; no, it is false; it is true and it is false; or it's neither true nor false. And so in the Mula Madhyamaka Karaka, Nagarjuna just addresses each question, and he shoots down every possibility. He'll use logic to explain why the effect isn't the same as the cause, and then he'll shoot down the idea that it is the same, or he shoots down that it is the same. He shoots down the idea using logic that it isn't the same, and then he just dismisses that it is and isn't, and then he dismisses that it neither is nor isn't, and that it rules out all possibilities. But I mean, it's kind of hard to refer to this kind of like early Madhyamaka as a kind of, I mean, it's sort of a philosophy, but I mean, it shoots down all concepts, including philosophical concepts. In fact, the Mula Madhyamaka Karaka, it kind of saves its own philosophy for last and then shoots that down. It's you can't say that it's true, you can't say that it's false, you can't say that it's true and false, and you can't say that it's neither true nor false. Just using what I think Bertrand Russell would call logic chopping. Sometimes the logical arguments wouldn't really stand up to scrutiny by modern Western standards, after like Aristotelian logic and the developments from that over the centuries. But I do think that the point is valid, that you can, I mean, any kind of skeptical scrutiny can dismantle just about any kind of claim. You can pull the rug out from under any belief with a sufficiently intelligent intellectual attack. You can at least shed doubt on it. And that's pretty much what Madhyamaka does to get to this point that, I mean, well, one point is that like you cannot tell the truth in words. Words cannot accurately represent reality. And so you can't even say whether reality exists or whether reality doesn't exist, or that it does and doesn't exist, or that it neither does nor doesn't exist. I mean, you can't say anything really. And it just leaves this emptiness behind, because it's sort of like this skeptical attack on every possibility. That's essentially how it works. And then that kind of gets worked into the idea of emptiness and voidness and dependent co-arising, where in the Mula Madhyamaka Karaka, Nagarjuna asserts that emptiness and dependent co-arising are the same. When we say that everything is empty or everything is void, we mean that, it seems to exist because of context, but I mean, under careful enough scrutiny, it just kind of dissolves, and there really is no inherent self-essence to anything. I mean, you can just kind of doubt everything away in a sense. I mean, that's probably not a good way of putting it, but that's kind of what it's about. It's just applying like relentless skepticism to every point. So, I mean, it's kind of like classical Greco-Roman skepticism in a way, in which, I mean, the early skeptics, like the Greek and Roman skeptic philosophers, they would go for, I should have looked up the Greek word, but it's like you can doubt everything, so you just don't really believe anything, and it causes like this peace of mind. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the Greek word, but it's sort of like, all this agitation just kind of leaves, and there's just sort of like this, the peace of emptiness. I mean, just you're free of these belief systems that enslave you. I don't know how good of a job I did on that, but I'm taking the fez off because it's kind of hot in here. Getting up into summery weather in South Carolina now. So let's see here. Philosophical method that they use to break down any argument down to emptiness. Yeah, it's just you use the tetralemma, it's called, of the four possibilities of yes, no, yes and no, neither yes nor no. And then you use like this intellectual attack, essentially, this ruthless, skeptical logic to dismantle every possibility. And then what's left behind when you get rid of yes, no, yes and no, and neither yes nor no? I mean, what else is there? It's just emptiness. But still, we have to function within the context of that logical emptiness. Anyways, I'm just going to move on to Ethiopian Fake Tig's next question. He says, it is said that the Hindus and Buddhists have had 1,000 years of debate before, and yet I can't for the life of me find a long debate between Buddhists and Hindus in YouTube. Is debate perhaps something that's discouraged? Well, like I mentioned to an earlier question, in Buddhism, like the Pasura Sutta of the Achakawagga, it really does discourage monks from engaging in debate. But as I also mentioned, in ancient India, it was very common, and a lot of Buddhists participated. In fact, I got a book. I've shown you guys this book before. Let's see here. Buddhist Logic, Volume 2 by Theodore Cherbatsky. And it was written back before the Soviet Union, in Russia 1.0, or whatever Russia was before, in Tsarist Russia. And a lot of it is just translations of, let's see, Vasubandhu, that's not it. Oh, well, I'm not going to try and find it. Maybe I should have tried to look it up before I started this video. But this book is mainly about the Dignaga school of Buddhism. And most of what we know about the Dignaga school of Buddhism is surviving in texts by Hindus that were attacking the Dignaga school. And so most of what we know, most of the medieval texts, because it was a medieval school, that have information, is like Brahmin philosophers trying to argue against it. But at least they're conscientious and not just sort of like in modern politics where you just slander the other side. And he's trying to give a fair representation of what this school teaches and then argue against that. Because if you just cook up some bogus straw man and argue against that, then in a formal debate, you're just going to lose because they'll just point out that you're arguing like a fool. But it's too bad that I can't remember the exact name of the person. Oh, Vachaspati Mishra. So Vachaspati Mishra wrote a lot of critiques of Buddhist philosophy, even though he wasn't a Buddhist, just as a kind of a debate thing. And it did happen a lot, and that's one reason why, as I said earlier, that Indian philosophy has reached the level of sophistication that it has reached, is that you had all these different schools, different religious systems even, debating and arguing with each other. And it's like, if somebody would level an argument that you couldn't answer, then you're going to have to come up with some answer. You're going to have to go back and think about it. And then maybe in the next time, you'll have a sufficient answer to stand up to that critique. And so that just kept happening over centuries, so that you wound up with some relatively profound, sophisticated philosophical systems in ancient and medieval India. Even though maybe you're not going to find a long debate between Buddhists and Hindus in YouTube, unless maybe it's in Hindi or something. So let's see here. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind like debating. I mean, it's like monks really aren't supposed to debate. I'm not a monk anymore. I mean, Buddhists really aren't supposed to debate. But I mean, sometimes, I mean, it's something that I think I'd be fairly good at. I did get contacted by Modern Day Debate, which is like a debate channel on YouTube, asking me if I'd like to participate because some supporter or friend of mine kind of suggested me to them. But they wanted me to argue in favor of an immortal soul, which, I mean, I sent an email back to them saying that, the Buddhists teach essentially the opposite of that. And so I didn't hear anything back from them after that. They wanted me to debate in favor of an immortal soul. So probably I would have been debating like some kind of scientific atheist or something. But yeah, I mean, I'd be game for at least a discussion with a Hindu. But I mean, most of the, like any kind of debate with Hindus that I have engaged in, I mean, at least half of it is them just completely rejecting, saying that it has been refuted. The whole Indo-Aryan invasion has been refuted, and they'll cite some, obscure reference to like some journal article or something with regard to DNA sequencing or something. And they're invariably, it's always either an Indian person or like a Western convert to Hinduism that believes all the stuff about people speaking Sanskrit in India for millions of years. Anyways, yeah, I mean, I guess there's debates between Buddhists and Hindus, although I don't know, there's really not that much of an issue anymore. I mean, in the West, nobody cares. I mean, it was really a hot issue back when India was like 50% Buddhist and 50% Hindu. Then, I mean, it was going hot and heavy with hammer and tongs, so to speak. But it's just kind of fallen out of fashion nowadays for Buddhists and Hindus to debate each other, apparently. Now it's more Christians versus atheists that you're going to find debates on YouTube. So I guess I'm just going to move on to Ethiopian Fake Tig's next question, which is, have you ever met an Arab monk or Buddhist before, or Arabs in general, who were born in the Middle East under Islam but took interest in Buddhism and actually took interest? Well, I knew a monk that was an American monk who was half Arab, but I mean, he was born in America. His father was born in Iraq, I think. Gosh, that's about it. Yeah, I've never really met like a natural born Arabic speaking Arab who converted to Buddhism. I mean, I assume it'd be relatively rare. Like Arabic countries tend to be pretty much, they're sold on Islam as a general rule. I did meet one Muslim guy who he came to a monastery in California where I was staying at the time. And he said he was open-minded. Maybe his girlfriend was a Buddhist or something. He came there and he was saying, there's prophets. Islam accepts prophets besides Muhammad, and he thinks that the Buddha was a legit prophet. So, I mean, some open-minded Buddhists or like Muslims could be willing to accept Buddha as like a pre-Muhammad prophet. I assume there are some that do that. Maybe the Sufis were more inclined to do that because they did incorporate some Buddhist and Hindu ideas into Sufism. But yeah, I have not met a whole lot. I've met maybe 2 or 3 black monks, and I think they were all temporary. I met one Mexican man who was, he was a layperson, but he was a devout Buddhist and a fairly advanced practitioner. He just had a really stringent spiritual practice, and he was like pure European Mexican. No like Mayan blood or Aztec blood in that guy. He looked like pure Spanish. Yeah, I mean, let's see. This question is kind of strange though. Have you ever met an Arab monk or Buddhist before, or Arabs in general, who were born in the Middle East under Islam but took interest in Buddhism and actually took interest? Yeah, I mean, like Malaysia, it's illegal for a Malaysian person to convert to any religion other than Islam. That it's illegal for a Malaysian citizen to read a Buddhist book or listen to a Buddhist sermon, and it's illegal for a Buddhist to deliver a sermon to a Malaysian citizen. And it may be similar in other Muslim countries. I know it's that way in Malaysia. I remember seeing like a Buddhist pamphlet that came from Malaysia. It was printed in Malaysia, and it said, "Not for Muslims," on the cover. And at first I thought, maybe it's just sort of like it wasn't like legally required. They just had their own reasons for saying that. But it turned out that was like a legal necessity. You had to put that on the book. Otherwise, you'd get in trouble in Malaysia for printing a non-Muslim book. You have to have a warning sign, like it's a pack of cigarettes or something. So I would assume that other Muslim countries are kind of like that. I mean, you'd have to leave the country in order to convert to Buddhism. I assume there are some people born in Muslim countries that then move to a Western country and then abandon their Islam and convert to some other religion. And I assume there's a handful at least who have converted to Buddhism. It's just that they're rare, and I've never met one that I know of. And so I'm just going to move on to the next question. This is from Robert. And Robert says, why do you believe that any good gets met with a corresponding evil and that the pluses and minuses cancel out? Well, first of all, I would just like to read a little quote by Carl Jung, which is appropriate to this question. Carl Jung says, every good quality has its bad side, and nothing that is good can come into the world without directly producing a corresponding evil. This is a painful fact. And there have been times when I've tried to think of something that was good that entered this world that really did not have a corresponding evil. And the only thing I could really think of would be Buddhism itself. I mean, Christianity comes into the world, and immediately, as soon as they gain power, they're persecuting the pagans worse than the pagans were persecuting them. And then they were like persecuting each other. Holy wars, the Inquisition, torture chambers, all this kind of stuff, witch burnings. So Christianity, I mean, you could argue that there's been a lot of badness brought into this world by Christianity. But with regard to Buddhism, I have to admit that does seem to be somewhat of an exception to the rule, although I can't really think of what it would be. Maybe it's just I don't want to see the painful fact or something. But with regard to this universe, it's just a balance of positive and negative. I mean, just even physics, like an atom. It's a balance between negative electrons and positive protons with some neutral neutrons thrown in. You know, it's just this cosmic balance of plus and minus. If you've got matter just arising out of empty space, then it does happen. Like at the edge of a black hole, where the space is getting stretched, supposedly, you'll have like it's like a positive and negative pair of particles, like a particle and an antiparticle that would arise out of nothing, and then usually they just collapse back into each other and just poof into nothing again. So the whole universe is composed, it seems to me, out of this cosmic balance of positive and negative, and that works with regard to any closed system. I've developed this idea that within any closed system, there has to be a balance of positive and negative. And our own mind is a kind of closed system. Because, I mean, you could say that outward things do influence us, but we have no contact with the outward things. We just have contact with what we are experiencing, our own mental universe. And so it's like, I called it the principle of subjective equilibrium, where, let's say, you could somehow get rid of everything in your life that you consider to be bad. Like the whole lower half of your world is removed. All that's going to happen is the line between good and bad is just going to shift so that the lower half of what you consider to be good is now considered to be bad. Or you're just going to have to come up with a bunch of new badness to replace the stuff that was gone. And I mean, just look at the way the world operates. You know, you cure a disease, a new disease crops up that there's no cure for, or something good is added, and there's always these unexpected side effects, so that really life is not better. I don't think people are any happier now than they were 2,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago. You know, you can say that, like in 2,000 years ago, for example, there was a lot more brutality, but there was a lot more of the opposite too. Like ancient India in the Buddhist time, you know, there were sages walking the earth to an extent that, I mean, it's practically unthinkable nowadays. But at the same time, you had like grisly, like public executions where the top of some criminal's head would be broken open and molten lead would be poured into his skull, and there'd be like these bandits attacking people on the roads and all this kind of stuff, just wars all over the place. This king is invading the territory of that king, and then his territory gets invaded by this other king. And I mean, it was like this mixture of good and bad that nowadays is just kind of working its way out, so that we're just in this level of spiritual mediocrity. So there's not nearly so much badness, but there's not nearly so much goodness either. It all balances out. And it's even the way Buddhist heaven realms work, where you get into this heaven realm. I mean, you can argue according to tradition that, you get up into Tawa Timsa heaven, and you've got the celestial mansions and the harems of nymphs and all this. So yeah, maybe. But you get up into the higher realms, and it's just subtlety. I mean, there's not much positivity and not much negativity either. So I guess you could argue the other way with regard to hell realms. It's just once you've been in hell for a while, you just get used to it. That's just the way it is. I mean, they have done studies on people that became quadriplegic. They got in like a skiing accident or something, so that they were paralyzed from the neck down. They can't move. And the study found that after a few months to adjust to the new situation, they were just as happy or unhappy as they were before. So I do think that that's just how the universe exists. It's just a balance of pluses and minuses that add up to zero. That's the semi-joke that I used to tell about how God created the universe out of nothing. It's just the pluses and the minuses just add up to the same nothing. The particle and the antiparticle just come out of empty space. So, also, Taoism has that idea of yin and yang, which is also kind of a balance of opposites. There's really not a lot of emphasis on that in Theravada Buddhism, other than the Loka Dhamma, the ways of the world. It's pairs of opposites, like praise and blame, this kind of thing that balance out. Or at least you're going to have plenty of both. Success and failure, that kind of thing. Anyways, I guess I answered that. I'm going to move on to Robert's second question. And Robert says, in the previous Q&A, someone asked about Buddhist tattoos. Do you think it can help a lay practitioner to get a tattoo of a word like sati or metta or anatta, etc., to remind them to practice Dhamma? Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that. I used to have my aunt Betty was an archaeologist, and she was doing archaeology in Afghanistan long ago, back in like the 60s or 70s. And one thing I inherited from her was a little pocket knife. It had this Arabic inscription on it. And I've met an Iranian guy who could read it. I mean, it wasn't in Iranian, but it was similar enough that he could read it. And he said it means, this too shall pass. So, I mean, and I eventually lost the knife too, so it did pass. But I mean, you could have like any kind of tattoo like that, impermanence, anicca, metta, mindfulness. Are you being mindful? Yeah, I mean, you can do that. But the thing is that, I mean, after you've seen it a million times, it's like this area of your brain just filters it out as background noise. I mean, it doesn't make much of an impression on you anymore. It's like having a skeleton in your cave or a skull on your table. At first it makes an impression, but, after a few months, it's just part of the background. I mean, you hardly pay any attention to it at all. So, I mean, yeah, you could do that. There was a guy named Charlie Tart. He used to be a professor in UC Davis, I think. And he had some kind of thing worked out on his phone that at random intervals, it would beep to remind him to be mindful. It's like, are you being mindful now? Every time the phone would beep, it would just be like calling you back to the present moment. Are you being mindful now? Or at least testing to see if you're being mindful. And something like that, I mean, if you really wanted something like that to remind you to practice Dhamma, yeah, I mean, that might actually be more effective than the tattoo. Just somehow get your phone to just beep at random times, preferably not too often so that it's a complete distraction. just to remind you, are you being mindful now? Are you being mindful now? That might work better because you get, are you being mindful now tattooed on your arm? I mean, occasionally you'll consider it, but after a while it just becomes, just this tattoo that you don't pay much attention to any more than you pay attention to the anchor or the heart with mom on it, that kind of thing. Well, I mean, it couldn't hurt, I suppose. If you think it'll work, you might as well. I mean, if it doesn't work, you're stuck with the tattoo for the rest of your life, probably. But I mean, it's not a bad tattoo to have. It's better than having a scorpion or something. Anyways, time to move on to Robert's third question, which is the last question. The last question of this Q&A. And he says, you've said before that you think psychedelics can be spiritually beneficial, especially for beginners. At which point in one's spiritual development, you think psychedelics, and weed for that matter, should be entirely avoided in favor of a strict adherence to the fifth precept. Well, the fifth precept says, I undertake the precept to abstain from ale, wine, and any intoxicant which causes cloudedness of mind, which is often translated as heedlessness. So it's not any drug that is part of the fifth precept. Like caffeine, for example. I mean, caffeine is a drug, but it doesn't really cause you to be clouded in mind or heedless. In fact, to some degree, it can have the opposite effect. Like paranormal investigators, like researchers into like psychic abilities, ESP, that kind of thing, generally say that you score better on these tests, like predicting cards, if you're caffeinated. So in a way, it makes your mind less clouded instead of more clouded. So any drug, I mean, it's sort of like a modern Western thing, like Nancy Reagan, just say no to drugs, where all drugs, except for maybe a few legal ones like caffeine, maybe nicotine, maybe a little alcohol, it's just drugs. But reality doesn't work that way. Like heroin is very, very different from cocaine, which is very, very different from psilocybin mushrooms. I mean, the effects they have are radically different from each other. So whether it would be a matter of a strict adherence to the fifth precept or not would depend on whether this substance is causing cloudedness of mind. I mean, if it's alcoholic, that's literally included, ale or wine. They didn't really have distilleries in ancient India. They hadn't invented hard liquor yet. So it's pretty much some kind of ale or wine, fermented grain or fermented fruits, essentially. Maybe throw in some fermented honey or something. So, getting to the actual question though, at what point in one's spiritual development do you think they should be entirely avoided? When they stop being helpful, I would guess. When it stops being a kind of skillful means. Like, I've said before that like a tab of LSD can get a person into an expanded state of consciousness that some people may try for decades to get into just through meditation and fail. Other people might have to strive for years to get to that same level of expansion of consciousness that a tab of LSD will do. Let's say 500 micrograms of LSD, 300 micrograms. So definitely it can be helpful. I mean, if you're breaking new ground, you're having experiences that are like a pure mystical state, like just wide awake, and your thinking process has largely stopped. Well, at the same time, your consciousness is expanded and you are more wide awake than usual. Then, I mean, that's not a bad state. Neem Karoli Baba up there once told Ram Dass that, he told Ram Dass this sort of substance was known in the Kuru Valley, centuries ago, but this knowledge has been lost. But it can be useful if you take it in a place where it's not too hot, where it's quiet and you're alone, then you can get benefit from this. But Ram Dass, who started off with psychedelics, he eventually stopped taking them. And he did say that there were certain like negative consequences from taking so much acid as he did. I mean, he was taking lots of it in his younger days, or his pre-India days. That he was starting to get like a blockage in his head somewhere, where it was kind of interfering with his meditative progress or something. But now you can have genuine insights from taking certain kinds of entheogenic substances. So, yeah, I mean, what it all boils down to is, is it helping you to cultivate wisdom? And it can at first. It can be invaluable. You can get invaluable insights from taking LSD under the right circumstances, or taking some kind of psychedelic under the right circumstances. You're just at a party or a rave or something, just out for a good time, maybe even then accidentally. But if you're like alone in a forest or something, and you're sort of like preparing yourself, kind of purifying yourself, maybe fasting, this kind of thing, doing some meditation, and then just with a spirit of reverence, you take the substance, then it can give you this insight, especially at first, that you are experiencing something that is very different from the normal state of consciousness, but it's just as real. A lot of people, if you're having like a genuine mystical experience, one of the common traits or characteristics of a mystical experience is the experiencer has no doubt whatsoever that this experience is at least as real as his normal waking consciousness. Another characteristic is that it has zero persuasive effect on anybody else. But it's like a kind of triangulation. That was in my generation, probably at least half of monks that were ordained in my generation started off with psychedelics, because you start off with this expanded consciousness, these insights that arise, that what you thought was reality the whole time before you took the stuff. It's not reality. It's a kind of virtual reality, but it's not ultimate reality. And then, of course, that just opens up this whole new world. Once you realize that this isn't ultimately real, it's just off to the races, essentially, spiritually. You really can't go back from something like that. As a general rule, people don't. So, once you're not breaking any new ground, or maybe your meditation has got good enough that you're like making progress with that and don't need the artificial assistance anymore, the training wheels or water wings or whatever, then sure. And did I answer the question? At which point in one's spiritual development do you think psychedelics should be entirely avoided in favor of a strict adherence to the fifth precept? I don't consider that taking an entheogenic substance for spiritual reasons is violating the fifth precept anyway. If it doesn't cause cloudedness of mind, it doesn't cause heedlessness, maybe has the opposite effect, then I do not consider it to be a violation of the fifth precept. Well, at which point should you just stop taking these things altogether? Well, when it stops serving you, when it starts becoming more of a hindrance than a help, or when it's just, it's just irrelevant, unnecessary, then you might as well stop taking it. And that's it. I'm done. Poke me with a fork, I'm done. And as I should always say at the beginning, and pretty much never do, if you have any questions you think maybe I can answer, no more than 3 per person per episode, please. And just include them in the comments under the video. And if I see them, and I generally do, I will do my best to answer them if they're asked in good faith. Some people might ask some kind of, snotty kind of question. Doesn't happen very often. Relatively rare, actually. You guys are polite, which is good. And like and subscribe if you have not done so already. And check out the URL links below. I do have a new book out, which you might be interested in. It's like autobiographical essays regarding my life as a monk, mainly in Burma, but in other places also. And aside from that, I say unto you, be happy. And now I will stop recording.